Sarah felt her heart racing as she approached the old wooden door. Dust motes danced in the weak morning light, filtering through the grimy window of the university hallway. Amanda, now known as Amy Smith, pushed her cleaning cart down the corridor, the squeak of its wheels a mournful soundtrack to her day. Once this hallway had echoed with the excited chatter of her peers, the hurried footsteps of researchers chasing breakthroughs. Now it echoed only with the hollow sound of her own sweeping. She paused outside a lab, a shiver tracing its way down her spine. It was Richard Miller's lab. Richard, the university's golden boy, the wealthy heir who had stolen her research, her future, her very name. The injustice still burned, a dull ache that throbbed with every labored breath. She was pregnant, carrying a life within her, a tiny spark of hope in the bleak landscape of her existence. But the weight of her past, the stolen dreams, pressed down on her, threatening to extinguish even that fragile light. Amy leaned against the wall, her hand instinctively resting on her swelling belly. "It'll be okay, little one," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of the building's ventilation system. "I won't let him win, I promise." The promise felt hollow, a fragile thing easily broken. How could she, a cleaning lady, fight against the power and influence of Richard Miller? He had everything: money, connections, the unwavering support of the university. She had nothing but a tarnished reputation and a baby on the way. She remembered the day it all fell apart, the presentation, her groundbreaking research on theoretical physics, the standing ovation. And then Richard, stepping forward, claiming it as his own, his family's influence silencing her protests, burying her truth. They called her delusional, unstable. They erased her. The sting of humiliation still brought tears to her eyes. She blinked them back, refusing to succumb to the despair that threatened to engulf her. She had to be strong for her baby. Mary, a kind older woman who worked in the cafeteria, often offered Amy a sympathetic ear and a warm smile. "You got this, Amy," Mary would say, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "You're stronger than you think. Don't let them break you." Mary's words were a lifeline, a reminder that even in the darkest of times there was still kindness, still hope. But even Mary couldn't fully understand the depth of Amy's despair, the crushing weight of the injustice she carried. Amy pushed herself away from the wall, her back aching. She had to finish her shift. She couldn't afford to lose this job. Not now. As she swept the floor, her mind wandered back to the equations, the theories, the elegant solutions that had once filled her days. The knowledge was still there, locked away in the recesses of her mind, a dormant volcano waiting to erupt. She glanced at the door of Richard's lab again. He was probably inside, basking in the glory of her stolen work, oblivious to the pain he had caused. A flicker of anger ignited within her, a spark of defiance. No, she wouldn't let him win. She wouldn't let him erase her completely. She would find a way, somehow, to reclaim her dignity, to restore her name, for herself and for her child. The dust motes continued to dance in the light, but now they seemed to shimmer with a different kind of energy, a promise of resilience, a whisper of hope. The squeak of her cleaning cart still echoed down the hallway, but it no longer sounded mournful. It sounded like a challenge accepted. Amy nearly jumped when Richard Miller's voice, amplified by a small microphone, echoed from the break room's ancient television. He was announcing a new initiative, a millennial mathematical marvel, a problem so complex, so groundbreaking, that its solution would be rewarded with a substantial grant. Enough, Amy calculated grimly, to probably fund her entire life, stolen career included. She almost scoffed. Another publicity stunt, another way for him to bathe in artificial brilliance. She reached for her mop, trying to ignore the flutter of anxiety in her chest. It was probably some esoteric equation, something so far removed from the real world, it would be useless to anyone outside of academia. "Did you hear that, Amy?" Mary asked, bustling in with a tray of coffee cups. "That Miller guy is offering a fortune for solving some math problem." Amy shrugged, feigning disinterest. "Probably nothing I could do. I'm just a cleaner now, Mary." The words tasted like ash in her mouth. Mary placed a steaming cup of coffee in front of Amy. "Don't you sell yourself short, honey. I remember you telling me about all those fancy degrees and research you used to do. You were brilliant, Amy. Still are, I bet." Amy looked down at her swollen hands, red and raw from the harsh cleaning chemicals. Brilliant. That felt like a lifetime ago, a cruel joke. That was a different life, Mary. This is reality. Reality is what you make it, Amy, Mary countered, her voice firm but gentle. That baby inside you deserves the best. And you deserve to show the world what you're made of. Just think about it. Mary's words lingered in the air long after she had left. Amy stared at the television screen, where Richard Miller was now beaming, surrounded by adoring students. The problem itself flashed briefly on the screen, a jumble of symbols and equations that swam before her tired eyes. She quickly dismissed it. It was impossible. She was in no condition, mentally or physically, to even attempt something like that. But later, as she scrubbed the grime from the university's ancient toilets, the image of the equation kept resurfacing. It was a challenge, a taunt, a whisper of what could have been. The size of the grant was significant, enough to give her and her child a fresh start, a real chance at a decent life. That night, Amy couldn't sleep. The equation danced in her mind, a chaotic ballet of numbers and symbols. She found a discarded notepad and a stub of a pencil in her locker. Under the dim glow of the hallway light, she began to write, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. The familiar logic, the elegant precision of mathematics, began to reassert itself, pushing back the despair and self-doubt. During her breaks, hidden away in a deserted storage closet, Amy worked feverishly. She devoured every math book she could find in the university's dusty library, brushing off the layers of neglect and rediscovering the joy of learning. The problem consumed her, a welcome distraction from the drudgery of her days and the anxieties of her future. She was careful to keep her work a secret, terrified of being discovered, of being ridiculed. Richard Miller would have a field day if he found out the cleaning lady was trying to solve his millennial marvel. But with each small breakthrough, with each elegant solution, a flicker of her former self returned. The dormant volcano within her was beginning to stir. The fear was still there, a constant companion. Fear of failure, fear of exposure, fear that she was simply deluding herself. But now, there was something else too, a burning determination, a fierce protectiveness for the life growing inside her, and a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could reclaim her dignity, her name and her future. The squeak of her cleaning cart still echoed down the hallway, but now it was accompanied by the soft scratching of a pencil, the quiet hum of a mind awakening, and the unwavering rhythm of a mother's heart, beating with purpose. Sarah felt her heart racing as she approached the old wooden door. Amy clutched the worn textbook tighter, the equations blurring slightly in the dim light of the storage closet. The scent of dust and forgotten things filled her nostrils, a stark contrast to the sterile labs she once knew. Hours melted away as she wrestled with the problem, her mind a whirlwind of numbers and symbols. She scribbled furiously on scraps of paper, the pencil lead leaving dark smudges on her fingers. "Richard, you're brilliant. This new algorithm, it's revolutionary." The words, spoken in awe by a colleague, echoed in her memory. Amy had been so proud, so eager to share her work. Then came Richard, his smile charming, his eyes gleaming with ambition. "Amy, darling, let me present this at the conference. It'll be great exposure for both of us. Exposure for him, oblivion for her." The betrayal still stung, a raw wound that time hadn't healed. She remembered the day she cracked the Riemann hypothesis, a feat that had eluded mathematicians for centuries. The euphoria, the sheer exhilaration of discovery, had been unparalleled. Richard had been the first person she'd told, beaming with pride, or so she thought. Now the memory tasted like ash. The present reality was a stark contrast. Emptying trash cans, scrubbing toilets, the indignity of it all burned. Yet, even in this demeaning existence, a spark of defiance flickered within her. This wasn't just about proving Richard wrong. It was about proving something to herself. She was still Amy Smith, the mathematician, the scientist, the woman who could conquer the impossible. One evening, hunched over a textbook in the library, a particularly complex equation finally yielded. A gasp escaped her lips, a wave of triumph washing over her. It was a small victory, a single step forward, but it was enough to keep her going. A woman nearby, noticing Amy's quiet excitement, offered a small, encouraging smile. Amy returned it, a silent acknowledgement of shared humanity in a place of learning. Back in the storage closet, surrounded by mops and buckets, she continued to work, fueled by lukewarm coffee and sheer willpower. Her pregnant belly pressed against the edge of the makeshift desk, a constant reminder of the life she was fighting for. This wasn't just for her, it was for her child. She would create a better future, a future where her child would know their mother was strong, intelligent, and capable of anything. The fear still lingered, a shadow lurking in the corners of her mind. What if she failed? What if Richard discovered her secret? But the determination burned brighter, fueled by the injustice she had suffered and the unwavering love for her unborn child. The squeak of her cleaning cart echoed through the halls, a mournful sound, but now it was accompanied by the quiet rustling of papers, the soft glow of a mind ignited, and the unwavering hope of a mother who refused to be defeated. Sarah felt her heart racing as she approached the old wooden door. Whispers of doubt, like insidious vines, began to creep into Amy's mind as she delved deeper into the mathematical challenge. The thrill of discovery, the adrenaline of solving a complex equation, was often followed by a wave of fear. "What if I'm wrong?" she'd mutter to herself, the question echoing in the cramped storage closet, bouncing off the buckets and mops. The weight of her pregnancy, the knowledge that she was fighting for 2 lives amplified the pressure. Failure wasn't just a personal setback anymore, it was a potential disaster for her unborn child. One afternoon, as she scrubbed the cafeteria floor, the scent of stale coffee and disinfectant heavy in the air, the fear became almost paralyzing. Richard. The mere thought of him sent a shiver down her spine. What if he recognized her? What if he realized she was the one trying to solve his challenge? The humiliation, the potential legal repercussions of using company resources threatened to overwhelm her. She gripped the mop handle tightly, knuckles white, fighting back the rising tide of panic. Later that evening, Mary found Amy slumped against a stack of textbooks in the library, her face pale, tears welling in her eyes. "Amy, honey, what's wrong?" Mary asked, her voice laced with concern. Amy shook her head, unable to articulate the swirling vortex of emotions within her. I don't know if I can do this, Mary," she finally choked out. "It's too much. What if I fail? What if—" Mary knelt beside her, taking Amy's hand in hers. "Amy, look at me. You are the strongest, most brilliant woman I know. You've already overcome so much. Don't let fear win. You have to believe in yourself, and I believe in you. We all do." Mary's words were a lifeline, a reminder of the unwavering support she had found in this unlikely friendship. She squeezed Mary's hand, a flicker of hope rekindled in her eyes. Needing a different kind of support, Amy hesitantly reached out to Claire, an old college friend she hadn't spoken to in years. Fear of judgment, of explaining her current situation, had kept her away, but desperation pushed her forward. Claire answered on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, Amy cautiously explained her situation, omitting the details about Richard, but confessing her struggles with the mathematical problem and the overwhelming pressure she felt. A long silence followed, and Amy braced herself for disappointment. But then Claire spoke, her voice filled with genuine concern and admiration. "Amy, I always knew you were brilliant. You were the one who helped me get through calculus. This doesn't surprise me at all. You're going to ace this, I know it. Don't let anyone, especially yourself, tell you otherwise." Claire's belief in her was a powerful antidote to the creeping self-doubt. It was a reminder of the woman she once was, the woman she still could be. That night, back in the storage closet, surrounded by the familiar scent of cleaning supplies, Amy looked at the equations spread across her makeshift desk with renewed determination. The fear was still there, lurking in the shadows, but it no longer held the same power. She had Mary's unwavering support, Claire's rekindled belief, and, most importantly, the unwavering love for her unborn child fueling her every move. She picked up her pen, her hand trembling slightly, and began to work. The numbers danced before her eyes, no longer symbols of fear, but a path to redemption, a way to reclaim her dignity, and a promise of a brighter future for her child. The whispers of doubt were still there, but they were now drowned out by the quiet, unwavering voice of hope, the voice of a mother who refused to be defeated. The squeak of her cleaning cart, once a symbol of her despair, now sounded like a defiant battle cry, a testament to her resilience, a promise whispered into the night. "I will not be silenced. I will rise." Sarah felt her heart racing as she approached the old wooden door. Amy stared at the final equation, the numbers finally yielding their secrets. A wave of exhaustion washed over her, but beneath it, a surge of triumph so potent it nearly brought her to her knees. She had done it. After weeks of relentless work, fueled by instant coffee and sheer desperation, she had cracked Richard's mathematical problem. A shaky breath escaped her lips. The solution, elegant and concise, lay before her, a testament to her intellect, a middle finger to the injustice that had stolen her career. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the neat rows of symbols. These weren't tears of sadness, but of relief, of vindication, of hope blooming in the darkest corner of her life. Carefully, meticulously, Amy began to document her solution, double-checking every calculation, every variable. She knew the stakes. One mistake, one tiny error, and it would all be for nothing. Richard would dismiss it, and she would remain trapped in this cycle of cleaning and despair. As she wrote, Laura stirred within her, a gentle flutter against her ribs. Amy placed a hand on her stomach, a silent promise passing between mother and child. "This is for you, little one," she whispered, "so you can have a better life, a life where your mother isn't defined by what was taken from her, but by what she can achieve." The question of what to do next gnawed at her. Submit the solution anonymously? It was the safer option. No risk of Richard recognizing her, no chance of facing his scorn, or worse, legal repercussions. But anonymity also meant remaining invisible, a ghost haunting the halls of the university. It meant denying herself the credit she deserved, the chance to reclaim her name, her dignity. Revealing her identity was a terrifying prospect. It would mean confronting Richard, facing the potential consequences of his actions, but it also offered the possibility of redemption, of exposing the truth, of righting the wrongs that had been done to her. The weight of the decision settled heavily on her shoulders. She glanced around the cramped storage closet, at the buckets and mops that had become her reality. Was she brave enough to step back into the light? Was she strong enough to face Richard, to challenge the system that had failed her? Laura kicked again, a more insistent nudge this time. Amy smiled, a watery, determined smile. Her daughter was growing stronger every day, a constant reminder of what she was fighting for. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about Laura, about giving her a future free from the shadows of her past. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was tempered by a fierce, unwavering determination. She would not be silenced. She would not be invisible. She would fight for her daughter, for her future, for the woman she knew she could be. Closing her notebook, Amy leaned back against the wall, exhaustion finally claiming her. The solution was in her hands, a powerful weapon in her fight for justice. The next step would be the hardest, but she knew with a certainty that warmed her from the inside out that she was ready. Laura was ready. They would face Richard, face the truth, and reclaim their lives, one equation, one step at a time. The squeak of her cleaning cart, usually a symbol of drudgery, now sounded like a victory march, a prelude to the symphony of change she was about to conduct. Sarah felt her heart racing as she approached the old wooden door. Amy, her hands trembling slightly, decided anonymity was her shield. Submitting the solution under a pseudonym she hoped would protect her, at least initially, from Richard's potential wrath. She couldn't risk jeopardizing Laura's future before she even had a chance to build it. With a deep breath, she typed the solution into a clean document, stripping away any trace of her personal style, any hint that could lead back to her. She chose a simple, unassuming font and crafted a brief, professional cover letter, signing it only as A. Smith, carefully avoiding any connection to the cleaning company. The email sent, she felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety wash over her. It was done. The solution was out there, waiting to be judged on its own merits, divorced from the prejudice and assumptions that had plagued her in the past. The university buzzed with anticipation. The anonymous submission, a masterpiece of mathematical elegance, was quickly verified as correct. Whispers rippled through the hallowed halls, speculation running rampant about the identity of the mysterious A. Smith. Professors debated the solver's background, credentials, and motivation. The sheer brilliance of the solution was undeniable, yet the anonymity fueled suspicion and intrigue. Richard, initially dismissive of the challenge, found himself increasingly unnerved. The solution, while undeniably brilliant, felt familiar. A cold dread began to creep into his heart. Could it be? Was it possible that someone had surpassed him, had solved the problem using insights he had missed? The thought was unbearable. His resentment festered, fueled by ego and a deep-seated fear of exposure. He couldn't allow this anonymous solver to undermine his reputation, to cast doubt on his achievements. He had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to have it all threatened by an unknown entity. Driven by a desperate need to protect his image, Richard launched a subtle campaign of discreditation. He publicly questioned the validity of the anonymous submission, implying it might be based on prior research, perhaps even a derivative of his own stolen work. He subtly cast aspersions on the solver's credentials, suggesting they lacked the proper academic rigor to truly understand the problem. "It's easy to arrive at a correct answer through trial and error," he declared during a departmental meeting, his voice laced with condescension. "But true understanding requires years of dedicated study and research. I highly doubt this individual possesses that level of expertise." His words were carefully chosen, designed to sow seeds of doubt in the minds of his colleagues. He played on their inherent biases, their preconceived notions about who was capable of groundbreaking work. He knew that in the rarefied atmosphere of academia, reputation was everything, and he was determined to protect his at all costs. But beneath the veneer of academic skepticism, a raw, primal fear gnawed at him. What if A. Smith was someone he knew, someone he had wronged? The thought sent a shiver down his spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, judged, that the past was coming back to haunt him. Amy, following the unfolding drama from the shadows, felt a surge of anger mixed with a bitter sense of vindication. Richard's attempts to discredit her work only strengthened her resolve. He was predictable, resorting to the same tactics he had used before: manipulation, intimidation, and outright lies. But this time she was prepared. She had anticipated his reaction, had armed herself with the knowledge and determination to fight back. She would not let him silence her again. She would not let him steal her voice, her dignity, her future. Laura kicked again, a sharp reminder of what was at stake. Amy placed a hand on her stomach, drawing strength from the life growing inside her. This wasn't just about proving Richard wrong. It was about building a better world for her daughter, a world where talent and hard work were valued above all else, where injustice was challenged and overcome. The stage was set. The battle lines were drawn. The anonymous solver had ignited a firestorm of controversy, and Richard, blinded by fear and ego, was walking straight into the flames. Amy, watching from the wings, knew that the time for anonymity was coming to an end. Soon, she would have to step into the light and reveal the truth no matter the cost. The squeak of her cleaning cart, usually a source of quiet frustration, now seemed to echo with a powerful promise. A promise of justice, of redemption, of a future where she and Laura could finally stand tall, free from the shadows of the past. Sarah felt her heart racing as she approached the old wooden door. Amy stood backstage, the murmur of the crowd a dull roar in her ears. The university auditorium was packed, buzzing with anticipation and controversy. Richard had called this forum to definitively prove the anonymous solution was flawed, a desperate attempt to salvage his reputation. He had rallied his supporters, colleagues who had always deferred to his seniority and influence, colleagues who now looked on with a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled judgment. She clutched the worn straps of her oversized purse, the weight of her laptop a comforting presence against her hip. On that laptop resided the irrefutable proof, the elegant equations that would dismantle Richard's carefully constructed facade. But it held something more precious, something far more vulnerable: her identity. The fear was a cold knot in her stomach, a stark reminder of everything she stood to lose. The anonymity had been a shield, a protection against the prejudice and condescension she had faced before, but the shield was cracking, and she knew she could no longer hide behind it. Laura deserved better. She deserved a mother who wasn't afraid to claim her accomplishments, a mother who stood tall in the face of injustice. Taking a deep breath, Amy closed her eyes, picturing Laura's tiny face, the unwavering trust in her unborn daughter's eyes that she knew would be there. That image fueled her resolve, pushing back the fear, replacing it with a fierce determination. This wasn't just about mathematics anymore. It was about reclaiming her life, her dignity, her future. The moderator's voice, amplified by the speakers, announced Richard's name, and a wave of polite applause rippled through the auditorium. Amy peeked through the gap in the curtains, watching as Richard strode confidently to the podium, a smug expression plastered on his face. He looked every bit the esteemed professor, impeccably dressed, his silver hair neatly combed, his voice booming with authority. "Thank you all for coming," Richard began, his voice dripping with condescension. "As you know, a purported solution to my challenge has been circulating, submitted anonymously. While I commend the effort, I believe a closer examination will reveal its inherent flaws." He paused for effect, scanning the audience with a self-satisfied smirk. "I have invited several esteemed colleagues to assist me in demonstrating these flaws, ensuring a thorough and unbiased analysis." Amy clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. Unbiased? He was a master of manipulation, twisting the truth to suit his own agenda. She could feel the anger rising within her, a burning fire that threatened to consume her, but she couldn't let it control her. She needed to remain calm, focused, and strategic. As Richard launched into his presentation, filled with misleading arguments and subtle distortions, Amy felt a surge of indignation. He was deliberately obfuscating the truth, preying on the audience's lack of specialized knowledge. She could see the confusion on some faces, the skepticism on others, but she also saw the unwavering belief in Richard, the ingrained respect for his position and authority. Suddenly, a wave of nausea washed over her. She swayed slightly, her hand instinctively going to her stomach. Laura kicked, a sharp, insistent reminder of her presence. Amy closed her eyes, focusing on the feeling of life growing within her. She couldn't falter now. She had to do this, not just for herself but for her daughter. When Richard finished his presentation, he opened the floor for questions. Several colleagues rose to offer their support, reinforcing his claims with their own carefully worded criticisms. Amy watched in dismay, feeling the weight of their collective disapproval pressing down on her. Then, a hesitant voice broke through the chorus of agreement. "Professor Miller," a young graduate student asked, "while I respect your analysis, I'm not entirely convinced. Some of the steps in the solution seem elegant, almost too elegant to be dismissed so easily. Have you considered alternative interpretations?" Richard scoffed, dismissing the student's concerns with a wave of his hand. "Young man, with all due respect, your inexperience is showing. These elegant steps are precisely where the flaws lie. They are based on faulty assumptions and lead to an incorrect conclusion." Amy couldn't stand it anymore. The arrogance, the condescension, the blatant disregard for the truth. It was all too much. She pushed herself away from the wall, her heart pounding in her chest. It was time. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out from behind the curtain and walked towards the stage. The murmuring in the audience died down as all eyes turned towards her. She could feel their stares, their judgment, their curiosity, but she refused to be intimidated. She walked with her head held high, her shoulders squared, her gaze fixed on Richard. When she reached the edge of the stage, she stopped and took another deep breath. Then, in a clear, strong voice that resonated throughout the auditorium, she spoke. "Excuse me, Professor Miller. I believe I can offer a different perspective." Richard turned, his eyes widening in disbelief as he recognized her. "Amy, what are you doing here? You're the cleaning lady." His voice was laced with disdain, his words dripping with venom. Amy ignored his insult, her voice unwavering. "I am also the anonymous solver of your challenge." A gasp swept through the audience. The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on Amy. Richard's face flushed crimson, his carefully constructed composure crumbling before his eyes. "That's absurd," he sputtered, his voice trembling with rage. "You're a cleaning lady. You couldn't possibly have solved that problem." "Perhaps you underestimate me, Professor," Amy replied, a hint of defiance in her voice. "Or perhaps you overestimate yourself." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I have brought my proof. I am prepared to defend my solution step by step in front of this entire audience." "Are you?" Richard hesitated, his eyes darting around the room, searching for support. He could feel the tide turning against him, the skepticism growing among his colleagues. He knew that if Amy presented her proof, he would be exposed. His reputation, his career, everything he had worked for would be destroyed. But he couldn't back down now. He had gone too far. He had to try to salvage the situation, even if it meant resorting to even more desperate measures. "This is a ridiculous charade," he declared, his voice regaining some of its authority. "I refuse to engage in this nonsense. This woman is clearly delusional, seeking attention with a preposterous claim." "Then you have nothing to fear," Amy countered, her voice ringing with confidence. "If my solution is truly flawed, as you claim, then it should be easy to expose it. Unless, of course, you're afraid of being proven wrong." The audience erupted in murmurs. Their curiosity piqued. They wanted to see the proof, to witness the confrontation. They wanted to know the truth. Richard, trapped in his own web of lies, had no choice. He had to accept the challenge, even if it meant facing the possibility of his own downfall. "Very well," he conceded, his voice tight with suppressed rage. "Let's see what you've got." He gestured towards the podium. "The floor is yours, Amy. Prove it." Amy smiled, a genuine, triumphant smile that reached her eyes. She walked towards the podium, her head held high, her heart filled with a mixture of fear and excitement. She was ready. She was ready to fight for her truth, for her dignity, for her daughter's future. The battle had begun, and she was determined to win. Sarah felt her heart racing as she approached the old wooden door. Amy took a deep breath, the air catching in her throat. Walking towards the podium felt like traversing a tightrope, the expectant gazes of the audience pressing down on her. But then she thought of her daughter, of the future she wanted to build, and a surge of determination washed over her. She wouldn't let fear win. As she reached the microphone, she noticed Claire and Mary in the front row, their faces etched with concern and unwavering support. Their presence was a balm to her nerves, a reminder that she wasn't alone in this fight. She offered them a small, grateful smile before turning her attention to the sea of faces before her. "Thank you, Richard," Amy began, her voice steady, surprising even herself. "I appreciate the opportunity to present my solution." She paused, letting her words hang in the air before continuing. "Before I begin, I want to address the claims that my work is delusional and preposterous." Her gaze locked with Richard's, who sat stiffly in his chair, a mask of forced composure on his face. "I assure you my solution is neither. It is the result of years of dedicated research, rigorous analysis, and a deep understanding of the underlying mathematical principles." She then launched into her presentation, her voice gaining strength and confidence with each sentence. She explained the intricacies of her mathematical model, the logic behind her calculations, and the elegance of her solution. She presented complex equations with clarity and precision, her passion for the subject shining through. The audience, initially skeptical, began to listen with rapt attention. Even some of Richard's colleagues, who had previously dismissed her, were now leaning forward, their brows furrowed in concentration. Richard, however, remained unmoved, or so he tried to appear. He interjected occasionally, attempting to poke holes in her arguments, but Amy deftly deflected his criticisms, her responses sharp and insightful. With each successful rebuttal, Richard's composure seemed to crack a little more, revealing the fear that lurked beneath the surface. As Amy progressed, she subtly began to weave in elements that mirrored her earlier work that Richard had claimed as his own. She referenced specific theorems, utilized unique methodologies, and even alluded to a particular anomaly she had discovered years ago, an anomaly that only she and Richard knew about. A murmur rippled through the audience. A few of Amy's former professors, who had initially been hesitant to believe her accusations, exchanged knowing glances. They recognized the brilliance, the originality, the sheer genius of her work. Doubts began to creep into their minds. Could it be possible that Richard had indeed plagiarized her research? Then Claire, bless her heart, decided to act. She stood up, her voice clear and strong, and addressed the audience. "I've known Amy for many years," she said, "and I can attest to her exceptional intelligence and her unwavering dedication to her work. I remember when she first started working on this problem. She was consumed by it, spending countless hours poring over equations and conducting experiments. To suggest that she is somehow incapable of producing this solution is not only insulting, it's simply untrue." Mary chimed in, her voice filled with emotion. "Amy is one of the most brilliant people I know. She has a gift for mathematics that is truly rare, and she is also one of the most honest and compassionate people I have ever met. I have no doubt that she is telling the truth." Their words hung in the air, adding weight to Amy's presentation. The tide was turning. The audience was beginning to see through Richard's facade, to recognize the injustice that had been perpetrated against Amy. Then a graduate student, a young man named David, who had once idolized Richard, stood up, his face flushed with anger and disillusionment. "Professor Miller," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "I have to ask you something. A few weeks ago I found a draft of a paper in your office. It contained some of the same equations that Amy is presenting today, but the handwriting, it wasn't yours. It looked familiar." He paused, his gaze fixed on Richard. "Professor, did you steal Amy's work?" Richard's face turned ashen. He stammered, trying to deny the accusations, but the words caught in his throat. He was trapped. His lies had finally caught up with him. The university president, who had been observing the proceedings with growing concern, stood up and addressed the audience. "In light of these serious allegations," he said, his voice grave, "I am launching an immediate and thorough investigation into Professor Miller's conduct. He will be placed on administrative leave, pending the outcome of the investigation." A collective gasp filled the auditorium. Richard's reputation, his career, everything he had worked for, was crumbling before his eyes. Amy watched as the weight of the world seemed to lift from her shoulders. Justice was finally being served. She looked at Claire and Mary, their faces beaming with pride, and a wave of gratitude washed over her. She couldn't have done it without them. She then turned her attention back to the audience, her voice filled with emotion. "I didn't do this for myself," she said. "I did this for my daughter, for the future she deserves. A future where hard work and honesty are rewarded, and where no one is silenced or marginalized because of their background or their circumstances." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room. "I hope that my story will inspire others to stand up for what they believe in, to fight for justice, and to never give up on their dreams." As she stepped down from the podium, the audience erupted in applause, a thunderous ovation that echoed through the auditorium. People rushed to congratulate her, to shake her hand, to offer their support. Amy, surrounded by well-wishers, felt a sense of triumph and vindication she had never experienced before. Richard, meanwhile, sat alone in his chair, his head bowed in shame. His world had collapsed around him. He had lost everything: his reputation, his career, his dignity. He was a pariah. As Amy left the auditorium, arm in arm with Claire and Mary, she knew that her life would never be the same. She had faced her fears, overcome injustice, and reclaimed her place in society. She had proven that intelligence and resilience can triumph over adversity, and that even a pregnant cleaning lady can transform a corrupt system. And as she looked up at the sky, a radiant smile on her face, she knew that her daughter would be proud. Her daughter would grow up in a world where justice, though sometimes delayed, could ultimately prevail. A world where her mother's courage and determination would serve as a beacon of hope and inspiration for generations to come. Richard's fall was swift and complete. The university, initially resistant, had no choice but to launch a full investigation, spurred by the overwhelming evidence and public outcry. David, consumed by guilt and a newfound courage, testified against Richard, detailing the manipulation and pressure he'd been subjected to over the years. The investigation confirmed Amy's accusations of plagiarism and intellectual theft, stripping Richard of his professorship and academic accolades. He was a pariah, his name synonymous with deceit and academic dishonesty. Meanwhile, the university president, humbled by the revelation of such systemic injustice within his institution, extended a formal apology to Amy. He offered her a full professorship, along with a research grant, and the opportunity to establish a center for ethical mathematics. He assured her that the university was committed to creating a more equitable and inclusive environment, where talent and hard work, not privilege and power, were valued. Amy, cradling Laura, who was now a healthy and thriving infant, accepted the offer. A wave of relief and gratitude washed over her. It wasn't just about reclaiming her career. It was about paving the way for others who had been silenced and marginalized. It was about creating a world where Laura could grow up knowing that her mother had fought for what was right, and that even in the face of overwhelming odds, justice could prevail. "I accept," she said, her voice filled with emotion, "not just for myself, but for all the other women and minorities who have been denied opportunities because of prejudice and systemic barriers. I will use this position to fight for justice, to mentor young scientists, and to create a more equitable and inclusive academic community." The following months were a whirlwind. Amy settled into her new role at the university, juggling her responsibilities as a professor and a mother. Claire and Mary were constant sources of support, helping with Laura and offering invaluable advice. David, seeking redemption, became a staunch advocate for ethical research practices and a vocal supporter of Amy's work. Amy's lectures became legendary. She had a knack for making complex mathematical concepts accessible and engaging, inspiring a new generation of students to pursue careers in science. She shared her story with her students, emphasizing the importance of integrity, perseverance, and the pursuit of truth. One day, as she was teaching a class on advanced calculus, she noticed a young woman in the front row who looked remarkably like herself, bright-eyed, intelligent, and full of potential. After class, the student approached Amy, her voice trembling with excitement. "Professor Smith," she said, "your story has inspired me so much. I never thought I could be a mathematician, but after hearing you speak, I know I can do anything." Amy smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "You can," she said. "You absolutely can. Never let anyone tell you otherwise." Years passed. Amy became a leading figure in the field of mathematics, renowned for her groundbreaking research and her unwavering commitment to social justice. She established scholarships for underprivileged students, created mentorship programs for women and minorities in STEM fields, and championed policies that promoted diversity and inclusion in academia. Richard, ostracized and alone, eventually moved to a remote location, where he lived a life of quiet obscurity. He never fully atoned for his actions, but he carried the weight of his guilt with him every day. Amy, on the other hand, flourished. She found love again, marrying a kind and supportive man who embraced her and Laura with open arms. Together they built a loving and happy family. One evening, as Amy sat on the porch watching Laura, now a bright and inquisitive young woman, play in the garden, she reflected on her journey. She had faced unimaginable adversity, but she had emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. She had not only reclaimed her place in society, but she had also transformed a corrupt system and inspired countless others to pursue their dreams. She looked at Laura, her eyes shining with love and gratitude. "Everything I did for you," she whispered. "I wanted you to grow up in a world where you could be anything you wanted to be, where your voice would be heard, and where your dreams could come true." As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the garden, Amy knew that she had achieved her goal. She had created a new equation, an equation that balanced justice, equality, and opportunity, an equation that would continue to inspire and empower generations to come. The final scene shows Amy, years later, standing in front of a classroom filled with eager young faces. She is teaching mathematics, but she is also teaching something more: the importance of integrity, the power of resilience, and the unwavering belief in the possibility of a better world. Her voice is clear and strong, her eyes sparkling with passion and hope. And as she speaks, she knows that her legacy will live on, not just in the equations she solves, but in the lives she touches. The camera pans out, showing the bright faces of her students, each one a potential future scientist, each one inspired by the remarkable journey of Amy Smith, the pregnant cleaning lady who dared to challenge the status quo and change the world. The screen fades to black,